getting a chance to sit down again and talk with former Indiana coach, Marquette coach, Georgia coach, ESPN analyst Tom Crean. Coach, how are you, sir?
I'm good, Jim. It's great to be with you. Thanks for asking me.
It is always a pleasure to have you. We were talking about a lot of things in the break. First of all, my daughter goes to Ole Miss. She's going to be a senior, which I wanted. I tried to get her to go to Indiana. She visited the Kel'el school, and I'm like, I got her. I was just like, man, because she's going to be a CPA. And then this Ole Miss stuff come up, and I'm like, wait, what? Ole Miss? I'm like, what are you talking about? And you mentioned your daughter's going to be heading off to Auburn, which is another great school. I know Kylie just loves her time at Ole Miss. SEC football and all of that stuff is a blast, and they're great schools as well.
Well, that's kind of where we were at. We thought our daughter, she didn't really want to stay in Florida. So once we accepted that, and it was easier for me to accept it maybe than my wife, but she looked around, she saw some schools. I took her to places last summer. Joni took her to some places this fall and winter. And all of a sudden, Ole Miss was one of those schools that she was wearing the sweatshirt and T-shirt around some, but she started to think about Auburn. She went to Auburn, and what she hoped she would feel at Auburn, she ended up feeling when she was there. So it's great. She's not on the other side of the world from us. She's excited about it, so we're excited for her.
Yeah, it's similar to a lot of players when they're going to look at schools, I guess. They get to a place and something just clicks. And I'm sure it's a combination of the staffs, the coaches, the environment, the school, and all that stuff. But it's whatever it is that just clicks for them.
Well, I think there's that, and it's almost like in recruiting and in coaching, it's a feel. Right? It's just an absolute feel, especially when you don't know what's coming and you don't have any true idea of what's coming. It becomes a feel more than your inner knowledge. So I guess it becomes an instinct, but it's that feel. And a lot of times when you have that feel, you want to do everything you can do to validate it. And that's part of it as well. But when it's all said and done, when somebody goes through college, like our first two, our daughter Megan went to Indiana, our son Riley went to Georgia, and now Ainsley will go to Auburn. It's the experience that they get through that they make every day that just builds on that feel. And if they're building confidence and they're getting energy from it and they feel like they're having a great time because they're very confident in the direction they're heading, even when they don't know where they're heading, then it's a good deal.
Yeah, I was thinking in the break when we were talking, you should be a life coach and write a book because the philosophies, which I know that part of that probably comes from coaching, but it's not. It's human stuff. You were telling me you were just recently in Bloomington this week, and I'm like, wow, there's not many people that have been in a place in a transitional way like you were, that has so much connection still and comes back and is a part of those areas and those communities and those things. And for one thing, I think that is outstanding, but that shows a personal touch to that. But there was a good reason for you being back as well.
Well, there was a bad reason, but still a good reason. And we hadn't been back very much. I hadn't been back very much at all. I don't know if this was the first time in maybe 6 years or so, but there's no way I would have missed it. Coach Ron Helmer, who came after 30 some odd years at Georgetown to Indiana, came right before me, but we built a great relationship while I was there. And that's ultimately what it is. I mean, it really is. As much as you love where you're at and as much as that's your home now, wherever your house is, that's your home. But Indiana was our home and will always be considered part of it. We had 9 years there, and you build the relationships with your players, with your coaches, with your staff, but you also build other relationships. And Ron Helmer was one of those. Ron and his wife, Mary, at that time, and their kids, Jay Arthur with his son-in-law, Tori Arthur, his daughter, then Justin Helmer came in during that period of time, their youngest son. And when you get a chance to be around Ron Helmer, like you knew it was it was, I don't want to say it was life-changing, but it sure was life-helpful. I mean, it was absolutely life-helpful. And then you get to the funeral and you see all the former athletes at Indiana, at Georgetown, from the camps he would run in Virginia, and you hear them speak. and it was just incredible to me. I mean, absolutely was incredible. I mean, I've said it since I left. Ron Helmer, when you combine being a teacher, being a mentor, and being a leader, I've never worked with anybody better. And I've worked with some great coaches. I mean, outside of my own staff, I mean, like, there's no question I have. But when you put those three attributes together, I'd never been around that till I'd been at Indiana. I'd never seen it since. And you get into the funeral and you sit there for 2 hours and it flies by because you're mesmerized by the stories and the remembrances of him. And to me, it was incredible. I mean, it absolutely was. It was like being at a coaching clinic, a leadership seminar. This is your life segment. It was like a documentary of one person's ability to impact so many different people in so many different ways. And it wasn't by being overly talkative or overly wordy. It was by how he made these people believe. And I'm a believer. I lived it. So I wasn't one of his athletes, but I lived it. And incredible man, incredible legacy, did just incredible things at Indiana University. Belongs in the Hall of Fame if he's not already. I doubt he is yet, but I mean, he certainly belongs there. He's in numerous other track and field Hall of Fames, but an incredible man, and I'm glad I got to be able to get in to say goodbye.
Former Indiana cross country and track coach, 407 All-Americans, coach.
I know.
407. I mean, I can't even comprehend that number. That's just staggering.
It is. Like, I guess I'd probably read that number somewhere, but like when they said it in the funeral, like it hits you straight up. I mean, that's incredible. And again, he was one of those guys. I mean, he wore cowboy boots, and one of the remembrances were family members and others wearing cowboy boots that day because he was just different, but he was who he was, and the impact that he had, and the memories that people have. And again, he was truly about the quality of his words and the quality of what he said to you versus the quantity. And I think that was an unbelievable lesson for all of us, in that he didn't just throw things out there. He was not a flippant, let me just see if this sticks type guy. Like, it was well thought out. And one thing that was just a blow away was the preparation and the foresight that he had for his athletes of what they could do, what it could be. And I think it blew his people away. And I think it was because he put so much time and effort and thought and detail into them that everybody's got an incredible remembrance. I mean, I remember we were in Indiana when his wife, Mary, his first wife, Mary, passed away, and it was sudden, and it was really sad. It was tragic. And because she got sick and she went very fast. But I remember being there with Joni, just absolutely blown away by how many athletes, not only from Indiana, but from all their other places that were there. And it just went to show, like, this was an absolute family affair that they had as they coached. And it was apparent again the other day with Ron. So it was tough. I fortunately got a chance to say goodbye, even though I didn't say goodbye. I guess he did back in a text the day before he passed last week. But he's one of those guys, the memories that you have of him, you kind of feel him all the time. I mean, you just do. He just made you want to be better no matter what you were doing. And the thing about him, for me, is he was there for me at a lot of times when he just knew that I would need something to be said, or something to be remembered, because we went through a lot of struggles, obviously, in Indiana, and we had a lot of successes. But he was around for the successes, but he was really there when you needed him and you didn't ask for him. And that's the kind of foresight and intuition and instinct that a great leader has, and Ron Helmer certainly had that.
It's amazing to me that you had the time, the wherewithal to have such deep relationships with all of these other IU coaches of, I don't want to call them lesser sports, because it's not that they're lesser, it's just less notoriety, I guess. Cross country is not basketball as far as a fan interaction, but it didn't matter. And you have made so many relationships and maintained those. That's just a human side of things. And because we don't see a lot of that. Being involved in the other sports, supporting all the other sports. You did as good a job of that as anybody I've seen.
Well, that, really, it was natural, because that's what it's supposed to be that way. And marrying into the family that I did when I was at Western Kentucky, my father-in-law, Jack Harbaugh, was the football coach at Western Kentucky. So I got to see a lot of different sides of it. And I got to see the struggles that he went through as he was basically they were dropping football. And he had to live through that and build that back up and do it on less than a shoestring budget. And eventually it culminated in him winning a national championship and 1AA. But I think a great example for me was being at Michigan State at the same time as Tom Izzo I worked for, obviously, but Nick Saban was there. So Tom and Nick had a friendship from when they were assistants together. Well, they had an incredible bond as football and basketball coach. And it also included a Hall of Fame hockey coach in Ron Mason. And Ron was an incredible leader, Hall of Famer, national champion. And those three really, they made everybody feel a part of it. As big as Nick was, as big as Tom was, as big as Ron Mason were, they were never too big for the other sports. They were always involved in recruiting. I think going to the very end of it, even at Alabama, Nate Oates had told me that Nick Saban would still spend 15 minutes with every official visit that Alabama basketball or Alabama women's basketball had. And Nick Saban got pretty busy as time went on, but he never lost sight of how important it was with the other sports. And I think being around that was really helpful for me. At Marquette, certainly at Indiana, because when you're the basketball coach at Marquette in Indiana, not so much at Georgia, but when you're at Marquette in Indiana, you are the flagship sport. And you can do one of two things. You can act like it and think that everything revolves around you and not have time for other people and be so locked into what you're doing that you don't understand that the others need your sport not only to be successful, but they need you to help them. And you can be a fan of those other people. Or you can just sit there in your office and have everybody come to you. And I wasn't going to be that way. I wasn't raised that way. That's not how I thought. I wanted to be around it. I learned from other coaches. I loved being involved in recruiting with the other coaching staffs, the different sports. I'm sure there were some times that I couldn't see some visitors that they had because of something else that was going on, but I don't think it was very much. And I just think that was unbelievably important. From a value system, but also from a role that you have. And I love to be in my office. I love to be on the court. I love to watch film. I love to work, but it was not above and beyond to make sure that I was doing what I wanted to do, not only needed to do, to help other people and to be there for them. And that's the way it should be. I mean, that shouldn't be uncommon. I mean, that's the way that it should be. There's no coach in any sport at any level, at any school, that they have different roles and responsibilities and they have different requirements and expectations. But coaches are coaches, players are players, and an athletic family and an academic family is a family. And your job is to be a part of that the best that you possibly can be.
And you certainly have done that. And if you can see by the comments, several fans still appreciate many moments where they have interacted with you at various times, talking about you taking the time to talk to them or their kid. And that stuff has such a lasting impression, because a lot of this stuff could have happened a decade ago now, but this is fresh in their mind still.
Well, and I think that's kind of how, like, I was raised, I was growing up in Michigan. My teams were the Tigers. They were the Pistons. They were the Red Wings. I liked the Lions, but I loved the Cowboys, right? But I loved sports. I loved being at sporting events. I loved going to sporting events. And when you're young, you're collecting cards and things like that and getting autographs. And I can remember to this day, right? To this day, the people that when I was a kid that blew me off for an autograph or wouldn't sign this or that. Or when you get children, right? And you bring your kids around and people that they could see you standing right there, but they wouldn't acknowledge you or the kid. Like, those kind of things always bothered me. And I just didn't want to be that person. And I know I made mistakes. This is not about some, like you did everything right. I'm not saying that at all. But I mean, I was very conscious of those things, like the practice closed, no admittance on the door. Of course, if you came to the practice, you were probably going to be invited unless it was an open practice. But to not have people feel like they could walk in and see Assembly Hall or see Cook Hall or see what we had. And that was absolutely stupid. I was going to do whatever. If somebody wanted to see that building and I ran into them, we're going to make sure that they did. I remember one person, they were on a trip from Europe. This was in my second year, right? It was in the summertime. They were on a trip from Europe, and Assembly Hall in Bloomington, Indiana was one of the spots on this trip that this family was taking, and they wanted to see it. So, you know, they didn't call it a bucket list trip, but it's a bucket list trip. I was excited to get them into the building, show them around, get a basketball out so they could take some shots and pictures. Like that's what it was supposed to be. And you got to share in this. I mean, it's a lonely world as it is when you're head coaching, and you got to make people feel a part of it, because that's what it is. And I think ultimately that's what that's what helped us get through the tough times at Indiana. That's what made people appreciate them so much more when we got it right. And because every person matters that walks in that building. And I know that sounds corny and stupid, but I don't care. I mean, it's absolutely what it is. Every person matters. That's why we had the attendance that we had, not just because of the tradition of Indiana, but I'd like to think that people felt connected to that program.
I think that there's no question about that. And being originally from Mount Pleasant, Michigan, I used to have rodeos in Mount Pleasant, Michigan that I would have to travel to. I remember that town very much. That and the fact that Charlotte is pronounced Charlotte in Michigan.
Exactly. I learned that the hard way too, trying to recruit in there. Yeah. I struggled with that for a while.
I used to be a TV sports anchor, and my last job was in Washington State. And man, they had some names that I butchered on TV until I had a producer say, "It's this, by the way." I'm like, "Oh, thank you." What's the upcoming season look like for you?
Well, right now it's still I'll be with ESPN, Westwood One Radio. I started doing some work for NBA radio on Sirius at the draft. And so I spent a week involved in shows and preparation and previewing the draft and doing interviews and things like that. And I'm actually going to go to Las Vegas to the Summer League for a couple of days and do some more of that this weekend. And it'll be great because I was going to be there anyways, because my son is with the Mavericks getting ready to start his third year. And so he'll have an active role in their Summer League team. He's assistant video coordinator and in player development there. So I'll get to see him. I'll get to see a lot of teams, get to see different friends, people like that, but I'll also be working, which is far and away the energizing thing to me is you miss the court, you miss the inner workings with a team, you miss making them better every day. There's no doubt about that, but you better find a way to keep making yourself better. And that's exactly what the study and being involved in television and radio and all those things do for me, is it allows me to keep learning and keep adding things. And eventually, you know, when you get on air, you get a chance to share it with people, and you hope that they learn something from it too. But I've had a good summer. I worked the NBA Players Association camp, working with their coaching program. So it was working with 11 different NBA players. It was working with, there were 100 players there. That was run by the NBA Players Association by guys like Purvis Short and Tim McCormick and Roy Hinson and numerous people. And it was just fantastic. I got 4 or 5 days with that. So I try to stay busy, try to see different things, be around different places. But the bottom line is I got to stay busy and got to be energized.
It doesn't sound like you're having much of a problem with that. And the Summer League has become, I don't want to say must-see TV, but it has become its own deal with fans from either college teams able to follow guys on, like for Indiana. It is obviously Kel'el Ware for Purdue. It's Zach Edey and many others out there that and Kel'el Ware having a good start to his Summer League season.
Well, he couldn't have found a better team. And I said this on the air, and I've said it a couple times. Kel'el Ware needed Miami probably more than Miami needed him. And I thought Mike and his staff did a really good job of building on some things. I think that the issues that Ware's got to overcome will be brought to life every day, being in that Miami Heat organization, from having different guys that have been a part of that. Heat culture is a real thing. I mean, and heat culture is it's a constant work. It's a constant plan every day. It's an early morning, especially when you're young. And I've seen bodies transform in there, seen minds transform in there, certainly games transform in there. And there's some other really good development programs in the NBA. but not every one of them. It's just like college. There's some that, they really do a good job coaching. They've got good talent, things like that, but they're not really making their players individually better every day. And I think a place like Miami does that. And I think for Ware, it'll be really good because he's got to make strides on both ends. And he's got to get that shot worked out so he's not shooting such a hard ball. He's got to not be as in love with the three as he is with the ability to drive, seal, slash, make the three a weapon, not a necessity. He's got to give multiple efforts, as most college kids going into the NBA do, and it not just be about block shots, but be the multiple different things that need to be done. And again, I thought Mike and that staff did a really good job of changing a lot in him. But I think if you talked to people that were around him, like I have there, and if you really watch him, you'd know that change is still really in the infant stages. And he is truly what you call a process player. And the only way he's going to make progress through that process is to understand that he's got to continue to bring the most out of himself every day, not just have others pushing, drive him to do that. And hopefully he will. And if it's going to happen, it'll happen in Miami.
Zach Edey, another big name player that is in the summer league, a rookie or NBA freshman, if you will. He's a completely different type of player. What are his, I don't want to say limitations, challenges going to be in being a presence in the league?
Well, there's a couple of challenges, but I think like anything else with Zach Edey, you got to start out with what the forces are. And then you work through the challenges, because whatever his challenges are defensively or offensively, it's going to be vice versa on the other side for the matchup. The day he got drafted, he became, in my mind, one of the top 5, 6, 7 screeners in the NBA. The day he got drafted, because there's a lot of slipping in the NBA. There's a lot of slip, run for the lob, but like in today's NBA game, when you can set a screen and create that separation for the guard to have to take on the big man, which he does, that's an unbelievable skill. And there's a lot of guys that miss that skill because they'd rather slip. I think he can seal. I think he brings that. He can pass the ball. What he's developed with Matt is every year he got better at something. And this year you really saw it with him scoring with his left hand. He makes free throws, so the shot is going to come. Is he eventually going to be a guy that they line up and he makes threes and pick and pop situations? Maybe. But he doesn't have to do that right now. What he's going to do is he's going to play with one of the best lob threats in the NBA, and Ja Morant, when he's in a good place, and that's going to help him. The other night he had 2 baskets over the top in his first game in transition, which was different because he's going to outwork some NBA guys. I think he's got toughness. He's got stamina. Matt could play him 40 minutes if it weren't for foul issues. He can make shots. I think he's got a meanness, a toughness about him. There's brute strength to him. I think the challenges are going to be a couple things defensively, getting out to big men, getting out to shoot, and then getting back in the paint. I think he's going to struggle a little bit with downhill pick and roll, downhill action from a guard that's just taking him on full speed. So they're going to need some help there. And then I think he's going to have to get adjusted to the NBA game, which is so much multiple pick and roll with the same guy. Or it might be dribble handoff into a ball screen, or ball screen back to a handoff, or something that's multiple, where he's going to have to do 2 things at once in a very short period of time, and which means he's going to have to be up, or he's going to have to really be in a position where he can defend it. But I think he'll do that. Like, I think that was an absolute great pick for them. I mean, it's a team that's got to make a jump. It's a team that's somewhere in the middle of the pack to the lower end of the pack of being a playoff contender right now in the West. And he changes the game for them. And I think he's going to surprise people. All he does is get better. And I think when you're 7'4", and then your wingspan is another +6 or +7, whatever it is, like that length is incredible. And so to me, I think he's going to do well. I really do. And I think it's not about if he starts. It's not about who's he like. It's about, okay, nobody else has anybody like him. So let's make sure that we utilize him to our best where we can. And if we can't utilize him, we take him out and put somebody else in.
Speaking of success, former player Anthony Edwards playing on the Olympic team with the Olympics about to start. Always a special thing for guys to be involved with, representing your country and getting to do something that very few people get to do.
Well, I think he's excited about that, and was awesome the other day. And Dwayne sent me a few more pictures yesterday, but then he put one on Twitter the other day of, you know, Coach Crean disciples, and he showed Dwayne talking to Anthony. You know, that to me is unbelievable. Not just because it's two great players, but because Anthony looks up to Dwayne, and Dwayne looks after Anthony because of our relationship. And I think, to me, to get two guys that have played in the Olympics like this and hopefully win a gold medal is an incredible feeling of pride watching those guys. But I think Anthony, he's got incredible confidence, but he's also got a respect. He's got a respect for the game. He's really become much more of a winning driven player. You know, you have to grow into that a lot of times, and he is growing into that. I think he looks up to players with respect, but I think he fears nobody. And I don't think he ever puts himself in a spot where I don't have a chance to be as good as these guys. I think Luka Doncic is the same way. I mean, Luka Doncic knows that he's really, really good. And I think when you have that level of confidence mixed with a work ethic, and that's what Anthony has. I think Luka Doncic has the same thing, but in this case with Anthony, he's got an incredible work ethic. So when you know you're really good, when you're very confident, when you feel like you can be in any situation, and you do the work to keep it going and to prove it, there's no limits to you. And I mean, he's not even going to be 23 until August 5th, and he's going to be in the Olympics playing for a gold medal. So I think as long as he makes the game easier for the other guys, I think what I think is going to happen with that team is I think their defense is going to be so good because there's so much pressure from each other to play defense at a high level, because you look around and LeBron and Steph Curry and Anthony Davis and all those guys are playing at a high level. I think they're going to be tough to deal with. The key will be, will the ball move? Will players move? And will everybody handle it when they're not playing the minutes that they want to play? And Anthony's going to have to go through that. But I think being in an environment like that, with his respect for the game, his work ethic for the game, and him being just loving to play, and the bigger the environment, the better for him, I think he'll do great there.
Right now, we've got the AAU coming to a conclusion season, the 3SSB Adidas Championship going on down in Rock Hill. It'll be followed by the Peach Jam. But you were the king of finding guys that turned out to be superstars that somehow got missed. And my favorite story of all time, and I'd rather get it officially from you, but is the OG story. When the way I understood it, you were going to look at either Juwan or somebody else. You see this guy like, who the hell is this? And he's not on the roster, not listed, and you have to track down who he is. And well, the rest is history.
Well, that's exactly – it wasn't Juwan. We were recruiting. Juwan was in another tournament. He was playing for Mocan Elite in the EYBL Peach Jam circuit, and we were already recruiting him. But we went to see another player playing for a team out of Memphis called Team Thad. It was Thaddeus Young had sponsored a team that Coach Norton Hurd coached. So we were going to see another player. We went to Atlanta for this. It was an Under Armour tournament. I think our 3 packages cost us $750 to get into the event. And we get into the event, and I'm watching the game. We got this big packet that we paid all this money for. And here's this guy in a headband, floppy hair, pressure in the ball, showing his length, big, thick, strong legs, wide shoulders, running the floor, getting dunks, getting steals, locked in, unbelievable eyes on the ball and focus that he had. And we couldn't find him in the book. So like halftime couldn't get there fast enough to go check the official scoring book. Well, they only had the last name in there. They didn't have OG. So like I'm trying to pronounce it like you're trying to pronounce some of the places that you were at in Washington and places like that. And I don't have it down, I know, but I write it down. And we watch the rest of the game. And you couldn't talk to the coaches at that point. So we made sure we were back. This was a night game. We made sure we got back to see him again the next day and saw him a couple more times and then dove into the film. And I knew we were intrigued from watching him play, because just something's got to strike you. And I think the biggest thing for me has been my instinct of the vision that I have for a player. And again, I've oversold it at times. I've bet on myself too many times thinking I could change somebody maybe to be what I thought they could be, and maybe they didn't really want it. But like, you better have a vision. And again, it's like we talked about at the beginning, it's how they make you feel, even when you don't know them. Like, how do you feel watching them play? And those memories should never go away. And for me, they don't, right? When you see somebody or talk to somebody for the first time. And so watched them on film. And after I watched him on film and saw some highlights of his movement, his shooting, things like that, like it was a no-brainer for me to offer. And our first phone call, I found out that he had people that they considered family. They weren't actual family, but they considered them family in Bloomington. He was intrigued. He wasn't hardly being recruited. But I was way past that being an issue with me. You know, if who was recruiting him, I would always ask, but you know, I know some people spend so much time watching and not evaluating, or talking and not really evaluating, that it's really easy to miss players. And to me, like, I trusted my instinct on that. We recruited him. He probably had, I don't know, he got it down to about 7 schools. But we recruited him and kept following him around that summer, flying in to see him special. And the rest is history. And if he hadn't lost 18 games his sophomore year, maybe there'd be a different history. Maybe not. Maybe not. But there might have been a different history. But I'm proud of him, and so proud of him. I was in New York when he got his new deal, and I'd missed a call from him because we were just getting ready to go on the air. I called back, didn't get him. I missed a call. He had texted me to let me know what his contract was, and I had my phone down because I was on the radio. And about 5 minutes later, Adrian Wojnarowski broke the news, and when I was on the air, and I looked back on my phone, I had it flipped upside down so I wouldn't be distracted by it on the air. And I saw the text, and man, I wanted to cry, and it was just unbelievable. And I got on the phone with him after the show was over. We talked about different things, and like most cases with those guys, you end with a prayer. You know, they kind of know what's coming. I ask them, and we end up praying on the phone, standing right there in the Barclays Center, in a back area there, just me and him on the phone. But like, I'm so proud of him because he's just an unbelievable person, and he's been through so much. And I know the work that he puts into that. And he's a great representative of what we did. He's a great representative of Indiana. I mean, this is a guy, Jim, that you'd be hard pressed to find many managers that he didn't know that he won't show up at their wedding. You know, like managers, grad managers. I mean, somewhere across the country, he just ends up being there. You know, Victor's like that. I mean, it's just, you know, OG is an incredible, incredible person.
Hello, everybody. Jim Coyle with Indiana Sports Beat Radio, and thank you for enjoying our content and videos. And make sure you hit that subscribe and notifications toggle so you don't miss out on anything, whether it's Indiana Hoosiers, the Boilers, the Colts, the Pacers, Indiana high school action, whatever's happening in sports. We're trying to bring it all to you, and make sure you don't miss out on a thing. Again, hit the subscribe button for us. Helps us out a ton. We appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you so much.